I want to invite you to take out of your bulletin your sermon notes. You'll find them as an insert in the bulletin. And on the back of that sermon note page, there's a prayer request. That's one of the requests that was offered up last Sunday at one of our worship services. I want to encourage you this week as you go into your prayer time to just lift up that particular prayer request that was offered up last week that's made its way into your hands. As I say each week, this is an opportunity for us as the body of Christ to intercede for one another and to pray for one another in our need. And so I want to encourage you to do that. If you have a prayer request that you'd like to offer up this morning, the prayer request cards are in the pew rack in front of you. And I want to invite you, when we sing our closing hymn this morning, to bring those prayer requests forward and place them with the others that are here on our prayer rail. Will you join me in a word of prayer? Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Will you sing it with me? Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All that I've needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Sing it again. Great is thy faithfulness. Let this be your prayer. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. God, great is your faithfulness. You are so good. You're so gracious. You give and you pour into us when we are least worthy of receiving. Thank you. Thank you for all that you have provided for us. Thank you for all that you promise to provide. And I pray, God, that in these moments ahead, as we take a look at your great provision and your amazing promise and your deep commands, help us, God, to see your heart. Help us to catch a glimpse of who you are and be reminded of whose we are. And we'll be careful to give you all the glory and all the praise. So God, in these moments ahead, I pray that you would deliver me from me and hide me behind a cross so that the words I speak will not be mine but yours. For I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. A young mother-to-be and her husband were in a birthing room at a hospital, and it was about that time. In that room was a nurse on one side of the bed, and on the other side of the bed was the husband. And he was doing everything that he had learned to do in those childbirthing classes that he and his wife had taken to prepare themselves for just this moment. He was coaching her on how to breathe. He was speaking encouraging words to her, just sort of help her calm her down. And she was at the same time about to squeeze his hand off because she was feeling the most excruciating pain she'd ever felt in her life. And then it happened. This blood-curdling scream, "This is hard!" And her loving husband said, "Oh, honey, I know it's so hard. Would you let go of my hand just a little?" And the nurse leaned over and whispered in her other ear, "Honey, this is the easy part. It's the next 18 years that are really going to be hard. Those of you who are parents or grandparents, I think you would agree with me that that nurse was right when she said what she said to that mother-to-be. Building a family is hard. Especially today with all the pressures and the stresses and the influences that slam at us and at our families from all kinds of directions. It just makes building a family hard. And so today I want to cut through all that stuff and offer what I hope will be a simple yet timeless message that reminds all of us, first of all, of what's most important in our lives. But then also points us down a path that is filled with purpose and peace. And I don't know if you're this way, I certainly am. I need these days an extra measure of purpose and peace, don't you? I mean, like you, I find that every day it seems like I get pulled in so many different directions and just trying to find that sense of calm and peace seems like it's always just outside of my grasp. That's why I think the Lord directed me to this passage of Scripture in Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's a word that Moses spoke over the Israelites after they had been wandering for 40 years in the desert. Moses had delivered them from 400 years of slavery in Egypt, and they were on their way to the land that God had promised to their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they were on their way. They were about to walk into this land that was going to offer them more luxuries and more provision than they had ever known before. It was also going to be a land that was filled with people who didn't know the Lord. They were going to find them surrounded with people who would try to influence them to follow their gods and to follow after their customs. And they'd find themselves surrounded by people who couldn't care less about how God wanted people to live. They just wanted you to live like them. Does any of this sound familiar? And so God, through Moses, spoke a word over the people. A word that will continue to be remembered by the people of God as long as they're living on this side of eternity. It's a word that gave them a promise and 2 commands. And that's what we're going to focus on this morning. We're going to focus on God's promise and the 2 commands that we see in this passage from Deuteronomy 6. And I believe this promise and these 2 commands are absolutely essential for any of us who wish to live the kind of life that God intends for us to live. But before I say anything else, I have to tell you that while this sermon today is intentionally directed at the family, I believe that what I'm going to share with you this morning is going to speak to every person in this room. Whether you're in elementary school or middle school or high school, or whether you're a college student, or whether you're a young adult, or whether you're married, or whether you're a grandparent or even a great-grandparent who has grandchildren in grade school, I believe this word that God has placed before us today is a word that is going to speak to all of us. It's timeless, and it has no regard for age or station in life. But I will say that this word that we're going to be digging into today is particularly relevant to families. And all of us are a part of a family of some kind. And I'll say a word to any of you who are college students here this morning. If this is your first year in college, or if it's your 4th year in college, or if it's your 7th year in college, I'm sure you have established for yourself some family systems within your college groupings. Maybe it's with your roommates or the people that you live with in your apartment complex, or maybe it's in a fraternity or some kind of family system, I'm sure, has developed around you during these college years. And then there at some point will be a time, the Lord willing, that you'll get married. And like your parents did with you, you'll engage in the hard work of building a family yourself. So let's get going. First, the promise. The promise that we see in this passage of Scripture, beginning in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 1, is this: God has a plan for you. God has a plan for you. I believe there's one thing that every God follower craves more than anything else. And you know what that is? It's to know that God has a plan for you. There's a passage of Scripture in the Old Testament that is central to the people who have been a part of Christ Church for these 27 years of our existence. And it's a passage of Scripture that comes from the 27th or 29th chapter of the Old Testament book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah 29, verse 11. And it says this: "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." Don't you want to have that assurance? To know that God has a plan for you? Don't you want to know that when it seems like everything's falling apart around you? That God has a plan? Don't you want to know when you find yourself staring at a circumstance that is greater than anything you could ever imagine possible in your life? You never could have imagined this was in front of you. Don't you want to know in that moment that God has a plan for you? Well, he does. And that's what Moses spoke over the Israelites when he spoke those words to them that was captured in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And this is how he started. "These are the commands, the decrees, and the laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord as long as you live by keeping all of his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy a long life. So hear, O Israel. Hear, O Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your fathers, promised you." That's the promise. The promise is that if you will observe the commands and the decrees and the laws of God, it will have a personal and a generational impact. A personal and a generational impact. On a personal level, Moses said to the people that if you follow the laws and the decrees and the commands of God that he gave you, then you're going to enjoy a long life, and that you're going to be blessed with gracious provision in this land that's flowing with milk and honey that God promised to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And while that may sound sort of like a foreshadowing of the prosperity gospel, you know, that gospel that says that if you love the Lord, then you'll have all this wealth, you'll have all this blessing, you'll have all this stuff, more than you could ever possibly imagine. If you'll just love the Lord, it's coming. That's the prosperity gospel. I don't think that's what this is saying, because I think you have to put this in its proper context. And consider the fact that one of Satan's biggest lies that he tries to convince us to believe is that obedience to God will never bring you happiness. I mean, if Satan wants you and I to believe anything more than anything else, he wants us to believe that being obedient to God is a drag. That if you do the things that God wants you to do, nobody's going to want to be around you. I mean, if you do all these things that God commands you to do, you're not going to have many friends. People might think you're some sort of holier than thou kind of person. I mean, you're not going to have any fun if you do all these things that God demands that you do. And yet this word from Deuteronomy says that if we'll be obedient to God, and if we'll live as he has commanded us to live, then we will experience the blessing and the provision of God in our lives that we would not otherwise know. Jana and I try to make Fridays our Sabbath. Sometimes we're successful, and sometimes we're not. This past Friday, we read a devotional in the morning from Sarah Young's most recent devotional book, Jesus Listens. So I'm sure you've read Jesus Calling. Well, she's written a new book called Jesus Listens. And the devotional that we read Friday morning to start our day was just unbelievable, at least for us. And this is what it said. Wonderful Lord, this is a time of abundance in my life. My cup overflows with blessings. After plodding uphill for many weeks, now I feel as if I'm traipsing through the lush meadows drenched in sunshine. Help me enjoy this time of ease and refreshment to the max. Thank you for providing it for me. I admit that sometimes I hesitate to receive your good gifts with open hands. Feelings of false guilt creep in, telling me that I shouldn't accept these gifts since I don't deserve to be so richly blessed. But I realize this is fuzzy thinking because no one deserves anything good from you. How I rejoice that your kingdom is not about earning and deserving. It's about believing and receiving. So instead of balking at accepting your gracious gifts, I want to receive all your blessings with a grateful heart. And then your pleasure in giving and my pleasure in receiving can flow together joyously. So after reading that, Jana and I made a decision that we were going to approach Friday of this past week with our hands open to the blessing and the provision that God wanted to bring in our lives, realizing that it could possibly result in us feeling like we were traipsing through lush meadows drenched in sunshine. Doesn't that sound like a wonderful experience? Well, I'm going to tell you, we did that, and our day was so much different. I found myself looking for his provision and being open to his blessings to flow. It was kind of like living a doxology all day long. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. It was kind of living that out throughout the day. And so the promise that Moses gave to the Israelites was if they would be obedient to the commands and the decrees and the laws of God, then blessing would follow. And I don't think there's anything wrong with living our life with that kind of mindset. I don't think it's wrong to approach life with a hands-open posture toward God. I mean, think about how a lot of us spend our days. A lot of us spends our days not with our hands open, but with our fists clenched, trying to hold on to that last vestige of control before we lose it all. Or some of us approach our day like this. Just bring it on. Some of us approach our day like this. Oh, I can't take it anymore. But what would happen if we approached our day like this? Recognizing that God has blessing and provision in store for us if we'll just open ourselves up to it. It's a way of saying, Lord, I'm going to walk in your ways. And I'm going to trust you for the blessing and the provision that you want to give me so that I can keep walking along this path that you have set before me. Another way of speaking about this is to simply say that our obedience to God brings a personal reward. And that's part of the promise. But the other part of the promise is generational in scope. And if it is to say that if you remain obedient to the commands and the laws and the decrees of God, then Moses said, you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live. In other words, your obedience to God will not just impact your life. Your obedience to God will have an effect on your children and their children after them. Or to say it another way, your children and your grandchildren will follow your example. They'll see you fear the Lord. They'll see you have reverence and respect for God. And if they see that in you, then there's a strong chance that they'll take that on themselves. I want to say to every single person in this room, no matter what it is, what your station is in life, whether you're a mom or a dad or a grandma or a grandpa or a child or a student, whatever your station in life, I have to tell you right now, people are watching you. People are watching you. If you claim to be a Christian, they're going to notice when you're walking with the Lord. But I'm going to also tell you that if you claim to be a Christian, they're especially going to notice when you're not. Because this applies to students, this applies to college students, this applies to adults, this applies to parents and grandparents. I mean, we live in a watching world. Your witness matters. And what this text tells us in Deuteronomy is that your witness has a reach that'll last long after you're dead and gone. That's the promise. It's personal and it's generational. And then comes the command. The first of two is this: love God with everything you've got. Love God with everything you've got. It comes out of these two verses, Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 and 5, where Moses said this, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength." These two verses comprise what is known as the Shema. Shema is a Hebrew word that literally means hear. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. It's considered to be the cornerstone of Judaism. I mean, Jesus said this is the greatest commandment, that there's nothing more important for any of us to do in our lives than to love God with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our strength. There's nothing more important than this. It's why Orthodox Jewish people pray this prayer 3 times a day. They pray it when they wake up, they pray it in the evening, and they pray it before they go to sleep. Moses said, love the Lord your God with all your heart. And what you need to understand is that in Jewish thought, that means the same thing as the mind. The heart and the mind are the same thing. Now, I know in our Western way of thinking, we don't think that way. I've heard it said that one of the most significant journeys that any of us will ever take is the journey, that 18-inch journey between your head and your heart. Well, in the Bible, there is no distinction between the two. The head and the heart are the same. So Moses is calling his people to love God with all their heart, with all their mind. It's another way of saying it is to conform your will around the will of God. Conform your heart, your mind around the will of God, and love him with all of your heart, with all of your mind. But he doesn't stop there. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. One person wrote that the soul, or the Hebrew word is nephesh, the soul is the seat of a person's breath and life and consciousness. The soul is the life of the person, the consciousness of a person, the breath, the essence, the being of a man or a woman. The soul is a part of you that will live forever. This body that we live in, it's going to decay, it's going to die. But your soul will live forever. And so when Moses throws the soul into this, it's not just your mind, not just your heart, but just that very depth of your being. The depth of your being. And then he goes on. In Deuteronomy 6, 4, and 5, it commands us to love God with our heart and with all our soul. And then he adds this strange Hebrew word. That the English translation we have is strength or might. But the Hebrew word, meod, actually means very. It's a strange word to use in this mix. So if you do a literal translation of that text, it literally says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your very. Doesn't quite make sense, does it, if you take all 3 of those apart? Which is evidence that the 3 are not intended to be taken apart, but kept together in this singular statement. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your very, or another way of saying it is to love God with all that is within you. I think it's why the Message translation of this text reads like this: love God, your God, with your whole heart. Love him with all that's in you. Love him with all you've got. So that's command number 1. Love God with everything you've got. Do you? Do you? I'll tell you why I think this is important. This is important because we have a tendency, maybe you could call it a predisposition, to make a God out of the things that we love. You know? We do it with our jobs. We do it with our hobbies. We do it with our passions. Some of us even make a God out of the sports teams that we like. I know I'm meddling right there. Some of us make a God out of our husband or our wife. And I think you'll also agree with me that many of us make a God out of our children or out of our grandchildren. And the reason this is important is because when we get caught up in the practice of misplacing our first love, we set God aside for the other things that we love more, that we have given kind of godlike status. But what Moses is telling us here is that God's got to be first. In fact, God made that point very clear in the first of the 10 Commandments, that I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods before me. He's got to be first, or else our lives will never be all that God promises them to be. So this first command in the Shema is to love God with everything you've got. And the second command is this: teach those you love about him in every way you can. So love God with everything you've got, and teach those you love about him in every way that you can. But I gotta stress, it starts with you. And then it moves out to those closest to you. But it starts with you. Moses was speaking here about the children of parents in the group that was making their way into the promised land. And I'm going to be focusing on parents in just a moment. But I also have to say that if you're a college student, this applies to your relationship with your roommate. It applies with your relationships with your friend group. It applies with your relationship with other kids at school, if you're in grade school. It applies to your relationship with your neighbors. It applies with your relationship with the folks you go out to eat with. It applies with your relationship with the people in your small group. We got to teach those we love about him in every way we can. Because as followers of Jesus, we are called, we're commanded, if you will, to teach those we love about him in every way we can. But it starts with you. It has to start with you. Abraham Lincoln once said that for a man to train up a child in the way he should go, he must first walk that way himself. Because if you're not walking with God, then you'll never be able to teach another person to walk with God. Because they're going to see your walk, and they're not going to hear a word you say. We were talking about this at worship planning this past week, and Tommy shared a quote from something he had read earlier in the week, and I asked him if he would share it with me, and he did. It's a quote by a guy named Adam Grant, and this is what it says. Parents try to teach values in conversation, but children learn more by observation. No matter what we say, kids discover what matters to us by watching what we do. Where we focus tells them what we prize. And so a key to being a good role model is paying attention to your attention. That's a good word, isn't it? So it starts with you. It starts with your walk, with where you place your attention. Love the Lord with everything you've got, and then pass it on. Don't leave that up to somebody else to pass it on. You do it. I mean, what you teach your children, what you model for your children, is exactly what they're going to teach and model for their children. And then it will go to even another generation as well. There's an old Chinese proverb that says that what one generation plants the trees and the next generation enjoys the shade. And students, you're not off the hook here either. If you're a student here right now, I want to tell you, your witness has a multiplier effect. Because when you share your faith, those who receive it become empowered to do the same, because they have experienced the blessing of having you share your faith with them, and then they see how it feels for them, and then they then are compelled to do the same for others. So your witnessing has a multiplier effect. Because I think all of us need to recognize that you may very well be the only Bible that some people will ever see. And parents, and I'll add grandparents into this mix, I'll tell you this when I baptize your babies. Your children are going to learn more about Jesus from you than they will from anybody else on the planet. So it starts with you. I mean, around this church, we're about making disciples who make disciples. And as I was thinking about that, this text from Deuteronomy 6, it's like it ought to be ground zero in the disciples who make disciples work that we do. Because Moses doesn't just tell us to love God with everything you've got and to teach those you love in every way you can. He also gets very practical, and I love how he does it. This is what he says in verses 6 through 9. He says, "These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. So impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads and write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates." So what he's saying here is that this isn't just Sunday conversation stuff. This isn't just something that you do when you got on your church clothes or when you're on the campus of the church. This is something you do every day. When you're sitting at home and when that miraculous moment comes about that all the screens are off, talk about God. Talk about God. Don't just have mindless chatter. Talk about what's really important. Talk about God. I mean, maybe that looks like when you're sitting at a table with your family, and instead of just talking about the news or what you've seen happen in the world, talk about how has God impacted your life over the course of this past day. What would happen if you did that today? At some point today with your spouse or with your kids, just ask the question, where have you seen God at work today? Talk about God in your home. Our homes need to be a place where God talk is not the exception, but the rule, where it becomes normative conversation. And then he talks about what to do when you're going from one place to another. When you're on the way, talk about God. So I want you to think about when you're driving from one place to another, and you got kids in the car, you got other people in the car, don't just turn the radio on or talk on the phone. Talk about God. Encourage one another about God. Talk about what's coming up and invite the people in the car to think about how God's going to help them with whatever it is that's coming up next. Or if you're driving by yourself. If you're driving by yourself, don't look at your phone. You're not supposed to do it anyway, but don't look at your phone or don't talk on the phone. Don't just listen to some radio program. If you're on your way to a meeting, be intentional about spending some time with the Lord. Say, God, I want you to help me, or will you help me as I walk into this next meeting? Help me to listen to the people that are around the table. Help me to show your love to the people that are going to be in the room. Or whatever it is that you're going to, let that time in the car be a time of great intentionality where you ask God to guide you into whatever it is that's next. And then when you lie down at night, or when you tuck your kids in bed at night, take some time to thank God for the blessings of the day. And be very intentional about that. And then when you wake up, thank God for the gift of another day. Ask him to guide you and to order your steps. Don't wake up and pick up your phone as a matter of first practice. I mean, how many of you is this the case? Don't raise your hand. But how many of you is it the case that your phone is the last thing you look at before you close your eyes and the first thing you look at when you open your eyes in the morning? I suspect that there are a lot of people that way. I hear people say, I got to get on Facebook and see what happened there while I was asleep. I'll tell you what I have done. I started this practice a couple of months ago when I realized how connected I was to this. This does not go in my bedroom anymore. Because you know what I realized? I realized that my practice was that I'd lay down in the bed. Typically, Janet and I shut down around midnight or so. And I'd lay down in bed, and I'd put my head on the pillow, and then my brain would start moving. And I'd pick up my phone, and I'd go to my email, as if somebody sent me an email at 12:30 a.m. And I looked at my email, or I'd go back to my text, or I'd pull up the news feed and just see what was going on in the world, as if anything had changed in the 30 minutes since I'd laid down. But I'd do that, and my mind would just start doing this. And then I'd put the phone down, and I'd try to go to sleep. And when I wake up, my alarm would go off, also on the phone, and I'd pick up the phone, turn it off, and I would see if anybody had sent me an email overnight or a text that I needed to see. This phone doesn't go in my bedroom anymore. There are two people that are in my bedroom, my wife and God. And that's all, and sometimes my kids. But that's all that needs to be in there. And it's made such a difference. Because I lay down at bed tonight, and I don't have this as a temptation. Now, if Jana does leave the room sometimes and she asks me something, I'll quickly pick up her phone and look at it, but I don't have this anymore. And so I can lay down and I can just say thank you, God, for this day. Or I wake up in the morning and I don't have this to pick up to look at, and I say, God, would you just order my steps for the day? You'd be surprised at how freeing and God-honoring that practice has been. We've got to be intentional about this. Because there is a war going on every minute of every day for your attention and for your allegiance. And the question that you've got to answer is, who are you going to bow down to? The culture or the world? Or Jesus? You can't fight this war on your own, nor can those you love. We have got to be battle ready every day. And those we love, we've got to help get them to be battle ready for this war that we're in for our souls and for the souls of our culture and our families. I've heard it said that Christianity is never more than one generation away from irrelevance. I've heard it said even more strongly that Christianity is never more than one generation away from extinction. Would you believe that 2 generations after Moses spoke these words to the people of Israel, would you believe that only 2 generations later, they were chasing after other gods? They had set God aside, and they were chasing a different love. It doesn't take much. So we got to be focused. We got to be focused as parents. We got to be focused as Christians. We got to be focused as followers of Jesus. We've got to be focused on the main thing, and that is loving God with everything that we've got and teaching those we love about him in every way we can. I mean, let's face it, what is it that you want most for your kids or your grandkids? Hudson is now in his senior year. It's our last kid at home, and we went to the pep rally on Friday, and I started crying when Hudson walked in with the football players because it's his last year. But I've been thinking, what is it that we really want for our kids? Do we want them to be the best athlete? Do we want them to be the best student? Do we want them to have a successful career? I'll tell you that for Jana and me, if she were standing up here, she'd be nodding her head. There's really one thing that we really care about for our kids, and that is that they love the Lord and that they know him as their Lord and Savior. That's what matters to us. Everything else is gravy. Friends, we got to be focused on that because there's so much at stake. And I want to just share this with you. I've shared this with some of you before, but I think this is something that's important for us to grasp. This rope represents eternity. This rope is much longer than what you see. It goes on back in there. But this rope represents eternity. All that God has planned for us on the other side of this life. And this part of the rope represents our lives on this earth. This little part right here. And you know what I find amazing? What I find amazing is that there are people who will invest incredible amounts of time and energy and money on this little point right here. And they'll say, if I can just get to right here, if I can just make it right there, everything's going to be smooth sailing from here on out. And from here on out is only just like that much more. But they spend so much time, so much energy, so much money trying to get there as if that's the most important thing. But you know what's really the most important thing? It's that. All of this, that this is preparing us for. This is time that we spend preparing ourselves and those we love for all of this. Because what's over here is beyond our imagination. And what God promises us in this part is to experience just a foretaste of all of this. Just a glimpse every now and then of all of this. But I fear that there are so many people who spend their life so focused on this, they don't even give any attention to this whatsoever. And there are people who will come to the end of this little red line, and they will have never heard about this. They will never have heard about the one who established this and planned for this. And they won't experience it. That's our opportunity. He has a plan. And that plan is for you and for me to be the kind of people who love him with everything that we've got. And to teach those we love about him with everything that we've got, in every way that we can, so that when they find themselves at the end of this red line, it's not an end, but a new beginning. A glorious and blessed new beginning that he gives us opportunities day after day after day to catch glimpses of while we're here. And so that's your opportunity in mind. To be those people who share with those around us during this part of our existence how great he is, how wonderful he is, and how glorious this will be. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for your love and your grace. I thank you, God, for all that you are and all that you promise. And I thank you, God, for the opportunity you place before each of us every single day to be a people who love you with everything that we've got and to teach those we love about you in every way that we can. So God, give us the words. Direct us to those very people, God, that you call us to impart your love and grace upon. And we'll give you all the glory. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.